What if the biggest draw in women's tennis wasn't a Grand Slam champion? Not yet. What if the player filling seats, electrifying crowds, and forcing the entire sport to pay attention was a 20-year-old from the Philippines who, not long ago, was ranked outside the top 100? Because that is exactly what's happening with Alex Eala. And the words that sent tennis media into a frenzy came from someone who knows the sport inside and out. Steve Johnson, a 12-year ADP veteran who has seen every kind of star tennis can produce, made a statement that turned heads instantly. He said Alex Eala is bigger than some of the biggest names in the women's game right now. Bigger in terms of buzz. Bigger in terms of energy. Bigger in terms of the reaction she creates when she walks onto a court. That is not a normal thing to say about a player who is ranked 140th in the world just 18 months earlier. But Alex Eala is not a normal story. The real question now is this: can she turn all of this momentum into a truly deep run at Indian Wells? Or is there still one final gap she needs to close before the full coronation is complete? Before we answer that, we need to go back to where everything changed. Rewind to March 2025. Alex Eala entered Miami as a wild card. No seeding. No expectations. No guarantee that casual fans would even recognize her name. To most people watching, she was just another young player trying to break through. Then she shocked everyone. First, she beat Madison Keys. Then she did something even bigger. She defeated Iga Swiatek, one of the most dominant forces in women's tennis. Suddenly, this was no longer just a nice underdog story. This was a real breakthrough happening in real time. By the end of that incredible run, Eala had become the first Filipino player in history to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal. That moment alone would have been enough to change the trajectory of a career. But for Alex Eala, it was only the beginning. Because what followed was not a one-week miracle. It was the start of a pattern. By the end of 2025, she had climbed all the way to world number 50. She captured her first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara. Her ranking kept rising. Her confidence kept growing. And with every tournament, the crowds around her seemed to get louder and more emotional. Then came another major sign that the world was starting to understand what was happening. Nike signed Alex Eala as a global ambassador. And this wasn't just a quiet endorsement deal. She walked through Nike's headquarters in Oregon and saw portraits of herself lining the walls. Portraits that celebrated not just her success, but her identity, her heritage, her flag, and the people she represents. That moment mattered. Because Alex Eala's rise is not just about rankings. It's not just about results. It's about connection. Millions of people see themselves in her story. And that connection started showing up everywhere. Then came February 2026 in Dubai, and once again, Eala gave the tennis world another reason to stop and stare. She faced Jasmine Paolini, a top 8 seed, and completely dismantled her in straight sets. 6-1 in the first set, then a tiebreak to finish the job. This was not survival tennis. This was controlled, fearless, high-level tennis against one of the best players in the draw. And after that win, the rankings updated. Alex Eala rose to world number 31. That made her the highest-ranked Filipino woman in the 47-year history of the WTA rankings. Think about that for a second. In less than 2 years, she had gone from being a player most casual fans had never heard of to becoming a history maker for an entire nation. And then Indian Wells released the draw. For the first time at a WTA 1000 event, Alex Eala was seeded. That alone was a statement. But what made the draw even more fascinating was the projected path in front of her. Suddenly, tennis fans were looking ahead to the possibility of a blockbuster matchup against Coco Gauff as early as the 3rd round. And just like that, the conversation changed. The same experts who had once ignored her name were now circling it. YouTube channels started breaking down her rise. Podcasts scrambled to explain how a player they barely discussed 12 months earlier had suddenly become one of the hottest names in the sport. Everywhere you looked, people were asking the same question. How did we not see this coming sooner? But the truth is, the fans saw it, the crowd saw it, and the numbers saw it. Because this story was never just about winning matches. It was about what happened around those matches. In Miami, when Eala made that wild card run, the atmosphere felt different. Fans in the stands said they had never seen anything like it. Filipino flags were everywhere. Entire sections that might have been half empty for other matches suddenly had life, noise, and emotion. It felt less like a routine tennis match and more like an event. That pattern kept repeating. More flags, more cheers, more attention, more energy. By the time she got to Dubai, it was impossible to ignore. And after one of her biggest wins, Alex Eala stood on court and asked the crowd a simple question. "How many of you have prayed for me?" The roar that followed said everything. That was bigger than tennis. That was belief. That was a player carrying the hopes of millions and feeling every ounce of it in return. So when Steve Johnson later said on the Nothing Major podcast that Alex Eala might be the biggest draw in women's tennis right now, it didn't sound crazy to the people who had been paying attention. It sounded like confirmation. He wasn't talking about future potential. He wasn't saying maybe one day. He was talking in the present tense, right now. That matters. Because when a veteran like Johnson, someone who has shared locker rooms with elite players for over a decade, makes a statement like that without hesitation, people listen. He has seen hype before. He has seen players get overpraised too early. He has seen what real star power looks like. And in Alex Eala, he saw something undeniable. Not just talent. Not just wins. A force. That is why this moment feels so important. For decades, tennis followed a familiar formula. First, you win the biggest titles. Then, eventually, the crowds and commercial power follow. But Alex Eala is flipping that formula upside down. Her fan army arrived before the biggest trophies. Her star power showed up before the major finals. Her commercial value started accelerating before she fully peaked in the rankings. That is rare. And it forces the sport to adjust. Tournament directors notice it. Sponsors notice it. Media notice it. When a player can fill seats regardless of seeding, regardless of round, regardless of opponent, that changes everything. Because now the question is no longer whether Alex Eala is a star. The question is how fast this can grow. And that brings us back to the one thing still hanging over the story. The gap at the very top. In Dubai, Eala faced Coco Gauff in the quarterfinals and lost decisively, 6-0, 6-2. It was a reminder that while the rise is real, there is still another level to conquer. To her credit, Eala didn't hide from that reality. She addressed it head-on. She said the gap was pretty prominent. No excuses. No deflection. Just honesty. And then she followed it with something even more important. But I'm on the right path. That line may be the most important part of this entire story. Because champions are not defined by pretending the gap doesn't exist. They're defined by recognizing it, accepting it, and closing it. And everything about Alex Eala's journey suggests she is doing exactly that. From the Miami breakthrough, to the Guadalajara title, to the Dubai statement win, to the ranking jump, to the seeding at Indian Wells, every chapter points in the same direction. Up. Fast. Relentlessly. This is why Indian Wells matters so much. It is not just another tournament. It is the next test. Can she turn buzz into a deep run? Can she turn belief into another breakthrough? Can she prove that the hype is not ahead of the results but actually lagging behind them? Because if the crowds in Indian Wells match the intensity we saw in Miami and Dubai, and if the results keep climbing, then 2026 may go down as the year the tennis establishment finally accepts what Filipino fans have been saying all along. Alex Eala is not coming. She is already here. And maybe the most powerful part of the story is that her supporters believed before it was fashionable to believe. They showed up before the rankings made it safe. They filled stands before the sport was ready to give her full respect. 115 million Filipinos did not wait for permission to believe in Alex Eala. They saw greatness early. They felt the movement building. And now the rest of the world is trying to catch up. So here we are, a 20-year-old from the Philippines. A rising star with history already in her hands. A player who has gone from overlooked wild card to global tennis phenomenon in what feels like the blink of an eye. The draws are getting tougher. The expectations are getting heavier. The spotlight is getting brighter. But the momentum? That feels stronger than ever. Now it's your turn. Can Alex Eala make a deep run at Indian Wells? Or does she still need a little more time before she's ready to fully break through against the very biggest names on the biggest stages? Let me know your prediction in the comments. And if you've been following Alex Eala's rise since Miami, then you already know this story is far from over. Subscribe now because the next chapter could be even bigger than the last.